Cath, welcome to the show.
Hi.
So excited to have you here. What a great event we put together. We actually have a few friends here on the line as well that are listening in live. And after we kind of go into your story, we're going to open up the channel so people can ask some questions.
Mm-hmm.
So first I want to introduce you. So you're my dear friend. We met a few months ago. You interviewed me on your podcast, the Cyber Synapse podcast, which by the way has an amazing sound intro. I love it. So cool. And you're a polymath. You're a real maverick in mental health in the UK. I really have to say that, like looking at your work, I definitely can say that you're an absolute trailblazer and you're ahead of the curve. So you don't register on the normal kind of classification under a psychotherapist. And you're a cyber trauma specialist as well for cyberbullying. I mean, Cath, you do so many things. So tell us a little bit more, where do you come from? Like, how did you appear in this universe?
Okay. So I think I was saying this to you the other day about kind of being a trauma therapist. Like every good trauma therapist, I have a trauma in my background. And when I was probably about 7, I went out with baby teeth and I had an accident and came back with no teeth, blood everywhere. I'd had a bike accident and it resulted in a number of years of going to the hospital, having lots of dental work and pretty much being, fairly traumatized by something that was wafted off as you'll get over it. So fast forward to becoming a teenager and, living in and around what we tend to call dysfunctional families in therapeutic world. I ran away to join the army and became a mechanical, electrical and electronic engineer.
Badass.
And was the first, it felt really difficult. So what's coming out in my hero's journey is it was an entirely male dominated universe and I was the first woman to do the trade. So there was a hell of a lot I had to prove along the way and it was difficult and there was lots of drinking.
So you had a really deep bath in toxic masculinity, you could say.
I did, yes. Yeah. And misogyny, but also the world of banter. So learning how to compartmentalize. So that became a skill to compartmentalize the trauma. And I then went off, got married, left the army. And like most forces marriages, and I'm going to use that quantifier there, it didn't go so well because most people who join the military are running away from something. So I got divorced and was a single parent for, let me just turn my email off, sorry about that, and was a single parent and brought up 2 boys for a long time. And in that time, I went back into the world of IT, technology, engineering, again, a very male-dominated environment, again, lots to prove. I think I've put on my website that what would happen is I'd turn up and I'd get funny looks because they were waiting for the IT guy. And obviously I'd rock up and could do some of the work. And then...
You're such an anomaly, Cath.
Yes, I'm actually what I call an outlier. I am that Z+3. So that's what you call standard deviations. And I'm right at the other end of the spectrum.
Amazing.
So I then went on to do a psychology undergrad because I thought, well, this male-dominated area is clearly not working. I went off and was going to do cognitive neuroscience for my master's. And there wasn't funding, so I would have had to do a job, I would have had to work full-time, and you can't do that with children as a single parent. So I went back into IT, gaming, and the building I worked in happened to house a number of therapists, for their work in a couple of the rooms, and I got talking and I kind of listened to the fact that there weren't services for children. The services for children had long waiting lists, and that's still apparent today. So I decided to retrain as a therapist, empowered, and off I went to make a difference, and began to specialize in and around trauma. And what I was finding at the time was I was doing teaching for young people around sex and relationships education. And I began to see what they were using online, listening to their language. I had what I call intrusive conversations to my children's, their friends, relatives' lives, to ask what was going on, and developed a theory about why we do what we do in cyberspace. And I kept getting told about this epigenetics in trauma, and you know, we'd looked at the work of like Bruce Lipton, we'd looked at Dawson Church.
Which year was that, Cath? When
So
did you start to look into that stuff?
About 2011, 2012. So just as I was doing the early stages of therapy, and I kept coming across this word, and and it just wasn't enough. People couldn't explain to me what was happening with epigenetics, and I would get the dismissive throwaway comment, well, it
maybe
like,
I will just like to clear up the term. It's really, what impact does our environment have on the expression of our genome in a very short way? Yes, would you agree with that definition?
Yes, and that environment can include the past.
Yes.
So what I was finding was we were being taught, well, there's intergenerational trauma that you can carry, and I went, whoa, okay, how does this work? And I was getting answers that were pretty throwaway, and it was, well, it methylates DNA, and that's all you need to know. And I am a why? I am that whingy, whiny 5-year-old. Well, why? But why? Where does that work? How does that work? And I set off to really go and find out what that was. And in doing so, came across somebody called Rachel Yehuda, who did some epigenetic research study on Holocaust grandchildren, and found that there was epigenetic changes in terms of eating disorders and eating problems for the grandchildren of the Holocaust survivors.
Amazing.
And this was so exciting.
Yes.
And yet it wasn't within the psychotherapy networking. And I was at a trauma conference, and I was learning about the polyvagal theory, and I was going, so this fits with that because of this, and this fits here. And still it wasn't enough. So I embarked on really trying to, if you like, hack what was going on for me. Because
it's the Hacking Health live show. This is why you're here.
And there is a family history for the females of cancer within my family. So I was trying to find a way to avoid or get around this or minimize it. And that led me towards, I didn't know it was called functional health or functional medicine at the time. And off I went to try and find something that would give me the answers. And what I actually did was found a training company at the time called GenSmart, which is where Thomas Olivier and my functional medicine GP, well, she's naturopathic, so functional medicine doctor is. And I met with Shania and Thomas, and I went down to do some training where I met Paula, Pete, and that was really the beginning of my journey, bringing and integrating that into psychotherapy. I think that's it.
Amazing. Okay. Yeah. So that was the beginning of your journey, and actually the meeting of mentors as well. So if you can talk about the work of Thomas Olivier, you were so kind to introduce me to him as well, who's currently launching Omnos very soon, next month, which is actually a big thing.
Actually, my mentors were Pete. So Pete, who you had on a couple of weeks ago on the networking event. So
PMF Pete.
Peter Maroney. And he was on the course, and he'd let me know about the course actually, because we'd been talking on social media. And I went for a coffee with Paula Eggers and realized that there was a bit of synchronicity. These were my mentors, my best friends.
The tribe.
And everybody had a different story, a different viewpoint, and it was a meeting of minds, as I call it. And it was just absolutely fantastic. And Thomas brings epigenetics to, nutrigenetics, which is where you can have your DNA tested for those single nucleotide polymorphisms. And that gives you a real health advantage to minimize and mitigate health implications going forward. So
is there a difference between, so I would call it like nutrigenomics, so that you know which nutrients fit your genetic profile. Is there a difference between nutrigenetics and nutrigenomics?
Yes, one's the test and one's the lifestyle. So it helps
Okay.
if I explain it that way. So you get your nutrigenetic test, and then nutrigenomics is
Is the
the
application of it.
application. Yeah.
Got it. Cool. Mhm.
A little bit like psychodynamic or psychoanalytic. You'll hear that as a terminology, but the application of it is usually psychotherapy.
So in your own journey, so how did you execute, for example, tell me, how did you do a nutrigenetic test? And then how did you execute nutrigenomic application in your lifestyle?
So the nutrigenetic tests were part of the Gen Smart Academy. So I think Thomas talked to you the other week and said that this was maybe his second, third, or I'm not quite sure where down the journey this was one of his projects. And part of that training was we did the nutrigenetic test, and we went with our results and we looked at what we could do diet wise and looking at the different pathways. And I happen to have a really rubbish detoxification pathway on phase 2.
Congratulations,
So,
me too. So
yeah,
glutathione related?
yeah, GST delete.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Really,
got 0.
I think it's very popular result within what I can see as Caucasian, Mediterranean, that kind of lineage.
Right.
I don't know why. That's another thing for me to go off and have a look at.
How did you hack it then? How did you hack your glutathione deficiencies?
So, apart from the fact that I went and sat with Shania and we did the living matrix and I did some functional tests, and it turns out I've got kind of high levels of metal toxicity. I had a lot of dental work done when I was younger because of the accident. I'm a child of the 70s, so there was a lot of lead piping. Then we moved to copper piping. We're now on plastic, so let's see what that actually has, what impact that has for people in the future. And I've done Dutch testing because as a woman, it turned out I was estrogen dominant. So there's lots and lots of things I've had to do in and around my detoxification pathway because it's really relevant as a female in terms of the health.
I have a really great hack for estrogen detoxification. So I learned this from Dr. Karazian, who's like an amazing functional medicine doctor for thyroid problems. And when I had a lot of gut problems, he put me on a maple water fast. So it was basically, you had to drink a few liters of water every day. And per liter of water, you have, I think we did a half a tablespoon of maple syrup with it. And the idea is that the glucuridation detoxification pathway actually needs glucose. And so as far as I know, the glucuridation pathway specifically removes stress hormones, yes, and as well some of the other estrogens. So this is a hypothesis I have, that when you do a fast and you actually add a little bit of maple syrup to it, it's much better to actually remove some of the hormonal rubbish from your liver.
And I'm now going off on what I call fizz buzzes. So I've gone, hang on a minute, that will fit with the HPA axis in terms of the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal glands, because when you produce a lot of cortisol in a stress moment, one of the things that really helps with children who are traumatized is having a sweet drink, or so not having the Coca-Cola, what we call a hyper aroused, hyper active state.
Just healthy sugar, something.
That's another thing for me to go off and have a yeah. And that's how my mind works, Matt, right? Is in terms of we're just beginning to talk about something and I've now gone, oh, that's really interesting, because I've noticed children who are, in fact, I'll give you a really good example, is last night, those 2 astronauts that did not get up into space must have had a flood of cortisol before it was
adrenaline.
Yeah. So they could have probably done with a sweet cocoa as the,
So fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So how do you work right now with people when people work with you? So for example, somebody comes in who's traumatized. What's your process? How do you help them? How are you mentoring them?
Okay. So I work with children and adults, And when somebody comes to the psychotherapy side of my clinical practice, they don't generally rock up and say, I've got a trauma or I'm traumatized, unless it's a recent, for something like a sexual assault.
Mm-hmm.
So more often than not, I'm doing my intake forms and I'm asking about significant events. I always ask about health conditions within the family. I ask about the pregnancy, how was the birth, what happened within the first few years of life, because those are those kind of epigenetic environmental factors that I'm looking for, because up to the age of about 3, that's the biggest growth spurt that will happen within the brain. And that's where most of the neuroplasticity takes place. And then what I'm looking at is how was this child's early development, maybe up to about 7, 8, 9 years of age, and whether that's the child I'm working with or the child within the adult that I'm talking to, I'm getting a really good baseline for how that person regulates themselves, the kind of way they manage their environment, the way that they see the world and the frame of reference. And then it will be a conversation about, okay, so what are you presenting with? And more often than not, adults will present with fibromyalgia, diabetes. They will come and talk to me because they're feeling sluggish, they've got no enthusiasm. And based on that, it's an introduction to, okay, what we can do is make small changes, and they might be around a bit of nutrition, sleep. We might talk about their diet habits, what they're doing to help themselves. And then we move towards a place where it's, okay, what we could do is right now, we could now do a nutrigenetic test.
Yes.
And that will give me a higher level of working with you to a deeper level that can then make those changes that give you the longer lasting life, the longer lasting change. And, you know, we're talking about longevity here. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about reaching your potential and getting to that place where most of us want to be, which is in flow. 90% of, you know, saying that we can have that experience at least once, twice, 3 times a day.
So tell me, Cath, you know, whenever I talk to you, such a highly engaged person, and tell me about dopamine. So I think like people who are very creative, people who really like execute in business, you know, there is this thing about dopamine that people are really engaged, like they're interested in new things, they're interesting to connect with people. So on one side you have the dopamine thing, high dopamine, and what happens when people have low dopamine?
Okay, so dopamine, I mean, dopamine's one of the most well-known neurotransmitters, alongside serotonin. So you'll hear people talking about serotonin's made in the gut and 70% of it is, and that's true, but it doesn't generally pass the blood-brain barrier. So the serotonin that's used within the brain is very different to that within the body. It does have a similar outcome. And for dopamine, you're looking at a neurotransmitter that's based in what we call the reward circuitry. So you will see, and it's one of my bugbears, people are reduced, and it's a reductionistic view, which I particularly kind of dislike, that people get dopamine hits. And we don't get dopamine hits, we get a flush of neurotransmitters that also work in tandem with other neurotransmitters. So for focus, you're looking at acetylcholine, that's your focusing neurotransmitter. And the dopamine is the reward circuitry that drives you towards something. So that's your motivation circuit, really. So it's motivation, reward. And what happens is, and I'm going to say a squirt. So what happens is when we're aiming for something, we will get a squirt of dopamine that pushes us towards something. That's the motivation. And we get a squirt of dopamine after the fact has been carried out. So after the task is complete.
And in between is the acetylcholine for the focus.
That's the focusing, yeah. But the primary squirt of dopamine is the one that's the highest. So if you listen to people who talk about taking drugs or drink alcohol, or it's the seeking of that's more stimulating. And quite often, and I'm sure many of the people who will listen to this, that you kind of go towards something and you're really, really excited. And then when you get to do the thing that you get to do, it isn't quite as great. And that's to do with your levels of dopamine. Mm-hmm. Now, there are a couple of advantages to having dopamine within your system, which is it can keep you focused on task, because the motivation plus the focusing synchronizes and they work in harmony, but it can also be very disruptive. So you're depending on your, and I think we talked about this the other day, depending on some of those SNPs that you have, for example, if you're fast COMT or slow COMT, that's
COMT, maybe you
COMT.
explain that, yes.
I can never remember the acronyms, I just know sorry, I can never remember the words.
Catechol methyl transferase.
Yeah, COMT. So if you are a fast COMT, you'll probably guess by now that I am. I use up my dopamine very, very quickly, which is fantastic in one sense because it doesn't leave me with a residue of it leading towards anxiety and feelings of jitteriness.
Because you got to be really in the sweet spot. Not enough is not good. Yep. Too much is not good either. So you want to be in the sweet spot.
Yes, because if you think about it, because it's a motivating and reward chemical, and it works in synchrony with other ones, and it's usually norepinephrine or acetylcholine, that what you can get are feelings of anxiety if you don't dissipate and use it very quickly. And it's the same for cortisol. That cortisol is meant to come up in a whoosh and then dissipate and be, kind of be gotten rid of, which if you've got rubbish detoxification pathways as well as.
I have this great hack I would like to throw here into the round with you. It's a detox bath. I learned this from Dr. Mark Hyman. It's the Ultra Detox Bath. And it basically, it's 2 big cups of Epsom salts, magnesium sulfate, and 1 big cup of baking soda. And then you put in like 10 drops of lavender and some other stuff in a hot bath at night. And the cool thing is, there's a lot of magnesium in it, so you get transdermal absorption of magnesium, and magnesium is super important for a lot of enzyme functions, detoxification, relaxation, all of this stuff. And the baking soda helps to alkalize your system. So what would that do, this combination, maybe you have an idea, what would that combination do to reducing stress or detoxification of hormones or to your neurotransmitters? Would you be able to synthesize something there?
Well, my go-to response there is I'm not a high-level biochemist, but straight away for me it would be the warm bath. So it's the warm bath that would actually create the environment for you to move into a different vagal state. So lots and lots of people talk about this vagal tone. And I'm actually going to kind of go off on one of my small soapboxes. Stephen Porges, who is the grandfather of, he designed, if you like, he is the person who proposed the polyvagal theory. He has never said vagal tone. What he talks about is the vagus nerve is a conduit. So therefore, it is pretty much like a road, and you can change the traffic on the road. Changing the road is very difficult. And given what I see quite a lot in the biohacking literature and quite often in the coaching world, where they'll say, oh, this gives you great vagal tone, I go, no, what it does is it helps you learn to modulate and modify and work with your own vagus responses, which take you through hypo to hyper. So for me, it would be the bath.
I discovered an amazing guy about this topic here in Germany. I don't recall the name of him right now. Rossini method. This guy is a psychotherapist, and he uses classical music and body movements and jaw movements to get people into different states. Yeah. Amazing stuff. And so, and it was a lot about singing, like blah, 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 and loosening up the jaw and moving the body in this rhythmic way. And instantly you feel that your eyes start to get wet because of the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yes, so the vagus nerve, and lots of people tend to put it into this division of parasympathetic and sympathetic. It's actually, and I'm now going to start talking like Stephen Porges, it's a phylogenetic nerve, which is made up of 3 branches, hence the word poly, And the one that we need to pay most attention to is the one that comes out from the back of the brain at the 10th cranial nerve, so this is just below the cerebellum, and it attaches to your ears, it attaches to your jaw, and it attaches to the orbicularis oculus, which is the eye muscles. Wow. It also connects towards around the throat, and that's what's called the safe and social zone, which is how we as the species of humans communicate. And more often than not, what we're doing is we're looking for those micro expressions, but we're also listening for them. And the difference between us and other mammals is we use our middle ear to listen to those variations. So as you're singing, you're actually using all parts of the vagus, the very top, the safe and social vagus nerve. And there's a protocol called Safe and Sound that Stephen Porges developed, and it uses certain pitches of sound waves and music. And I've been watching and attending Stephen Porges for about 7-8 years now, and I love going to his classes, because one of the things he does is takes you through different breathing, but different faces, different sounds, and he kind of plays about with your with your nervous system. I do this when I'm teaching, and it's about how can you get people to understand what's going in their body. Well, you get them to do somatic body work, and that's actually what I do as a therapist, is a lot of, and what was that like when we did that, and what was that like when we did that. So I have a trampoline, I have kickboxing sets that I get people to punch on, I get them to roll around, we do yoga, there's lots that we do in order to get people to move about in their systems.
So Cath, you know, when I listen to you, you're really a maverick. You're synthesizing all these different topics to get results, right? How are you being perceived by other players in the mental health game? Like, what are you dealing with there? Are you being treated as, like, you know, the crazy Cath living outside of the village and we don't want to deal with her? Or is there like a nice exchange? People are open, or do people feel threatened?
To give you the truth about what people think at the moment, oh yes, I am on that verge of crazy. Cath is talking utter shite, and none of us know what she's talking about, and she's using acronyms, and why do we need to know that as therapists? And very good, Cath, you know, off you go. There are a number of therapists who, and one of them I'm actually in conversations with, because I want to bring functional health into psychotherapy. I think psychotherapy is missing this linchpin.
So basically, when you say functional health, like functional medicine-based technology?
Yeah. Yes. So to bring in the nutrigenetic testing so that people can learn what epigenetics really, really looks like. So there's, and a lot of this happens in, I suppose, any sector, that people will say, well, we can work to the high level. And if I give you a little bit of a philosophy reference here, Ken Wilber talks about integral levels of movement.
Development.
And what he talks about is the higher you go, the more people you leave behind, because they're not in the same sphere as you, and they don't have the same drive, passion, or, you know, Z+3 like I am at the end of the spectrum, saying, actually, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. So within my world of psychotherapy, there isn't the drive to bring this stuff in. We're only just starting to talk about
not yet, Cath.
There's a number of conversations where somebody will say, oh, maybe we should talk about the gut-brain axis, or maybe we should talk about so and so. And at the last trauma conference I went to last year, somebody who I respect very much, actually, Ruth Lanius, was talking about trauma-related altered states of consciousness, which is one of my favorite kind of topics. And she said, maybe we should be looking at mitochondria. And I went, yes. And everybody looked at me, and I was like, okay,
look, you know, one of the books for my greatest breakthrough with my health was The Ultra Mind Solution from Dr. Mark Hyman. This book completely blew my mind. And because he tells his own story, his own hero's journey of fixing his broken brain as a doctor, as an MD, because he spent a lot of time in China, and then there was a lot of heavy metal toxicity in the city that he was living in, and he lived there for many years, and then the toxic bucket was filling up. And then he came back to the US. He was a totally broken doctor, and then he got into functional medicine, and he met Jeffrey Bland, who is like his key mentor. He got into genetic testing, did find out about his SNPs. And this is how Mark Hyman became Dr. Mark Hyman, who, you know, is now the most prolific writer. You know, again, right now he's writing a book. He's finishing it in mid-June again, and he's amazing. And so he was my entry into really understanding the functional medicine framework applied to regaining superior brain function and healing it if your brain is broken, because I had this autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's, and I was a complete vegetable. I couldn't think, I couldn't speak. I was like totally, you know, horizontal.
Mm-hmm. And they would be the kind of people that come to therapy before going to a functional medicine doctor. That this is what I'm beginning to see, is that most people will go within the UK, obviously, because I know you're not within the UK, that within the UK, people will go to the NHS and it's almost a trial and error, long-term procedure around chronic health. And yet what I'm finding is a client will come in the room and I go, okay, so what brings you here? Well, I'm feeling depressed, and I go, okay, what kind of foods do you eat?
And they go
what
like, what the F? Like, Cath,
yeah.
Dr. Knibbs, what are you talking about? I
Yeah.
came here to talk about my problems and you want to change my diet?
Yeah.
How do people take up on that?
More often than not, they're willing to give it a go. You know, by the time they get to my therapy room, they are distressed, they are at their wits' end, they are generally not, and quite often the aha moments for people are when I have what I call the no shit Sherlock moment, and they go, so this really bad thing happened to me when I was little, and then and I go, well, do you think that has anything to do with what's going on today? And you just get this glazed at, well, it could be. And I go, right, this is that no shit Sherlock moment. Absolutely, that has resulted in this. And what I tend to do is working in, so the framework that I use as psychotherapy is something called interpersonal neurobiology. So for every single person I see, it's neuroscience and attachment based processes. And I then know how to work with my client based on, if they had a secure attachment, I'll be able to say things and suggest. But if it's an avoidant attachment style, which means that when they were very young, there were lots of things that happened that were distressing, they're not going to engage in the recommendations I make unless I do it in a way that introduces it to the client for them to go, oh, I'll do that.
What do you do there then to build up that? So you're talking, if people are, for example, very disconnected from their feelings and they can't feel empathy, or they can't pick up when somebody has empathy for them. Is that right? Or what do you?
Yeah, there are people who are non-empaths, but most of the time it's so trauma generally results in people becoming what we call dead from the neck down. They do not connect to their bodily feelings because it's too frightening. And for example, I was on the Health Hacking Summit not so long ago, and I was talking about how the past in the present can prevent you being able to hack stuff going on in COVID. And what I was actually saying is, if you have an early childhood trauma, or you have a really disruptive attachment style, and you begin to do breathing techniques, you may evoke that trauma really quickly. And that results in people going, oh, well, it's shit, it doesn't work for me. And it's knowing that what will happen with my clients is they have a tolerance. And it's finding that tolerance, increasing that tolerance over time to introduce those functional health principles to then make the changes that they need to make. So it can be slower.
What comes to mind there for me, it's like a little bit, you have to build up the wiring. So you have to build up the circuitry to take more heat through proper nutrition, so that then people are more equipped to actually work through the traumas they had, or kind of face their demons, right?
Yeah, and I can tell you, if I said to somebody, just eat some avocado and, you know, a couple of eggs, and I'm going to get told, piss off. I'm just going to get told where to go. How does that help me in the fact that I was sexually abused as a child? You know, it's really about building that relationship to introduce something and going, well, here's the science, here's how we can do it together. And, you know, it's very different. So if I've got a coaching client, they want a specific outcome very quickly. But psychotherapy is that building of a relationship to almost reparent, because generally people who have a secure attachment don't come into therapy.
Yes, amazing. So I think I have this theory that really, like, the mentor is really like, it's like a father figure, you know, or mother figure.
Yeah.
It's the same type of energy that is very impersonal. It's not a personal, it's like a real love connection.
Yeah.
Where you caring for somebody and you put love into it, energy into it. And Cath, did you know where the term mentor comes from?
Now I did, and can I remember it? No, because my head's full of all this stuff that I had to remember for today.
I have to place it here because it's one of my favorite stories. So the term mentor it was the name of a very old wise man in the kingdom of Odysseus from the Odyssey.
Yep.
And so when Odysseus went onto his hero's journey, he left his son Telemachus behind in his kingdom. And then he chose Mentor, the guy Mentor, this old wise man, as the protector of his son while he was away. And it is like this really beautiful story, like as well when you read Stephen Bly's Iron John story, that
Which
it is
I
said
have.
that every young boy from 0 to 6, he's really like in the universe of the mother predominantly. Of course, he interacts with the father, but he's very attached to the mother. And then the next journey is that he moves from the world of the mother into the world of the father to identify himself as a man, learn about masculinity, learn about what is a man about. And then at 14, the parents should facilitate a transition into the world of the mentor, when they know their kid really well, to identify their strengths and weaknesses, but to provide like this guidance outside of the family for the child to really develop their craft, their passion, their skill set.
Yep.
And I think as a therapist, you can really be that person for so many people. People maybe didn't have a mother or didn't have a father or never really a mentor on a deep emotional level, right?
Absolutely. And just to kind of come back to a bit of the Bruce Lipton that I mentioned earlier, if you bring in real, true, heartfelt love, so what's called agape, not romantic love, into that therapeutic relationship, you will create what Bruce Lipton calls the honeymoon effect. And as he says it, and he's written a book called The Honeymoon Effect, as well as The Biology of Belief. In The Honeymoon Effect, he talks about how many sick people do you know that are within that very short period of first getting into a romantic relationship? He'll go, hardly any. And it's because the way that we start to think about ourselves can really, really have an impact. And this is one of the things that I'm looking to do with therapy, is it can have a real impact on how your genes are expressed. This is that epigenetic markers. And there's got to be a way that we can start measuring this before people go into therapy and when they come out the other side. Amazing. So hopefully with platforms like Omnos and potentially, I'm not sure the Nordics, so I'm a Nordics DNA Live practitioner, and I'm not sure those are going to give the markers, but I suspect that there will be changes in platforms, and I think Omnos is probably one of the platforms that will be able to do that. Mm-hmm. The issue I've got at the moment, many people who come to therapy can't afford to be doing high level testing, functional health. Yeah. So when it's popular, it will be available for everybody.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So there needs to be a real shift that this stuff is becoming democratized. And I mean, the way how it happened in America, it was a bottom-up approach. So patients got more and more educated because all the great functional doctors, put books on the market. Yes. And then patients read the books, and then they approached the doctors, look at this. And then by time the doctors had to adopt slowly to this new paradigm. And at the same time, which is happening in America right now, they go top down as well. So Mark Hyman is very active actually in Congress to put functional medicine on the political map.
Yes.
And so I think it's very important that you guys network in the UK and build a group of people, and then you approach different MPs. How are they called in England?
Yeah, we have MPs. I think at the moment, so this battle has been going on a long time, and in terms of within the UK at the minute, we're only just starting to push something called the ACEs. And the ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, which is an underwhelming way to talk about trauma that happens to children. And what's currently happening is we're now creating buzzwords about trauma informed. And I'm kind of going, but we need to be health informed. We need to be really functional health. We're here with the ACEs, and it tends to be used as a scoring mechanism to go, well, So that the ACEs study actually shows if you have 4 or more ACEs, you have more propensity to develop lung cancer, heart problems, well, basically any cancers, and that you have a higher likelihood of dying early from diseases. And obviously my work around epigenetics is if you have a trauma as a child and it methylates your DNA and it creates those epigenetic SNPs, then of course you're going to have medical problems later on in life, because this is the transition. And if I could get people at the top to listen to the fact that this is how it happens, ACEs create those medical issues that you're now spending millions and billions of pounds on trying to solve the chronic illness, when actually go back to the source and start making the interventions early.
Yeah. So why don't you do like a group program, and then you get a scientist in and you actually do a real study on this stuff?
That's what all this is for, Matt. This is why I'm now part of this, you know, and hopefully, and I was hoping to do this. So I did a blog called Do All Biohackers Have Trauma? You
Love
probably
it.
do. Yeah, we probably do.
Yes, we all do.
And given the fact that, well, all of us have trauma, but it's how we build our resilience. It's how our background comes to fruition. You know, did somebody advocate for us? Did we have to coin your phrase, did we have a mentor? Were we validated for what happened to us, or were we left, you know, like I was with the accident, that it's fine, you've had the braces, it'll be fine. And actually that's not how it was for me. I needed it validating that it was a horrific bloody event. And what I got was, well, you're bleeding all over the floor, you know, go off. And it was that kind of real dismissive reaction based on, you know, parents who didn't know what to do right in that moment, and not being complete and utter gits.
Yes.
Because we don't do that necessarily. We make mistakes as parents, and that's where sometimes the trauma happens as well.
So Cath, to sum it up, what are your real superpowers as a hero?
Oh, I don't know. I leave that for other people to say. I'm rubbish at self-promotion. I don't, it's like when we talk.
Let's phrase it that way. What do you love doing every day?
What do I, talking is definitely something everybody would say about me, but yes, educating and bringing this information to people. So in terms of those things that I do, I'm currently writing around cyber trauma to bring that, because I think that's really, really important right now. And then it will be this kind of stuff once I've built my tribe.
Yes. Cath, we did not talk at all about COVID-19 until now. So what do we say about it? Be health informed?
No. I'm going to go with a be very much like, so the way that I work as a practitioner, and it's very much like Bruce Lee used to say, the individual is more important than the system or the state. So this is really about use whatever works for you. So there's things about, so like I talked about breathing earlier, for some people that is going to be evocative. So if it doesn't work, don't do it. Try something. Be aware that you might be avoiding it because you didn't like the feelings that were evoked. Maybe stick with it, maybe don't. You know you, and this is what I say to all my clients, you are the expert of you, not me, not anybody else. You know you better than anybody else. And in terms of your own mental health, it's all about pick something that you feel works for you until you can go to somebody to find a mirror, which is what a therapist or a coach or a mentor is, to reflect back what isn't working.
Yes. Okay. So Cath, what are your big projects right now? What are you rolling out?
So I am working with another therapist who I have great respect for, and we are trying to put together pretty much a conference that will bring functional health practitioners to talk to therapists and counsellors, and hopefully start to build some of that conversation going forward about.
You will take biohackers as well?
Absolutely. I think one of my speakers is somebody I'm already talking to.
No, I mean, because I'm so passionate about mental health, being a guy, and having had these issues with Hashimoto's and brain function and depression and all of this stuff.
And
very passionate about it.
Yeah, the best people to talk about it are those that are passionate and those that know.
Yes. Okay, so you're rolling out a conference, and are you you're doing a program as well, I think, isn't it?
So I'm just about to roll out next week, and it's going to be based on kindness, as we talked on LinkedIn and other places. I'm doing a 6-week, and it'll be an hour's check-in where it's about hacking your health, coming out of COVID, and it's free. You know.
So you're gonna do like a live training regularly.
Well, it'll be six weeks of within the hour. It'll be me talking about where people are at the moment, because we're just about to go into that phase in the UK where people are going back to work. So anxiety and stress are going to be very high. And I suspect people will be managing, oh, there's somebody too close to me. Oh, there's no PPE. It's going to be really, really difficult for a lot of people. And this is about what can companies do? What can so-and-so do?
Amazing.
So I'm going to put it together. I'm doing it completely free for the first 6 weeks, and then it will be a case of anybody can join at any time. And
we will create a video course.
Well, I was thinking I'm going to document it, just record and see what happens each week.
Document. Every piece of content is incredibly valuable, because whatever you say, Cath, is pure gold.
Mm-hmm.
You just take a snapshot?
I did.
Me too, before. This is history here that we're making, Cath.
Yes, your document. I did.
This history.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so how can people find out about you?
So I have my personal website, which is catherineknibbs.co.uk, and I'm sure that people will need to learn how to spell it, but it's okay. You can find me anyway.
I love your Instagram handle. I always looked for you, and I was like, oh, damn it, what is it again?
Most people called me Knibbsy while I was growing up, so I've tried to have that name on every platform, but some people keep taking them. I blame that on the fact that I was brought up Roman Catholic, and there's a bloody load of us, because that's what Catholics did, didn't they? There are lots of children, so
and they called them all Catherine.
So it's probably lots of Knibbsies out there. And also it's 5.0, because web.
Yeah, you iterate. Yeah. And we wanted to talk about execution trumps perfection.
Oh yes, better done than said, as the phrase is.
Yes,
that was to do with the fact that you'd put a comment onto my post, and I think it was brought up in the WhatsApp group that you'd done it on the wrong account. But you know what? Yeah, absolutely.
No, but I think this is so important for us to know, because if you're real trailblazers, I mean, it's our responsibility to work as hard as possible to get this information out. And so for me, it's really about when you're executing, for example, an information campaign, that you just get that stuff out and you just amplify it and amplify it and amplify it. What we saw exactly with this article that I posted about Gary Vaynerchuk's kindness post. Mm-hmm. And it was an experiment, and it totally blew up. I mean, I think as of speaking, I should actually quickly check my LinkedIn. As of speaking, I think we're hitting like 70,000 views, and it's my first viral post ever in my life. 68,000 views, and I placed Dr. Mark Hyman in there, because he's like one of my greatest heroes, and I wanted to put that there, and Gary Vaynerchuk, because I just love his message of kindness.
I love his no qualms, no bullshit, says it as it is, and I'm very much like that. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't always go down very well in the spheres that I frequent.
This is a tip how I deal with people. So I always remain kind. And I always remain generous with people, because here's the strategy. If you're really generous to people, you find out from the people about the character when they say thank you. Mm-hmm. All the people who don't say thank you, you already know, okay, it's interesting, but it's not so cool, because it's like manners a bit. And mm-hmm. I think only when you really can truly say thank you to somebody else, you actually receive the gift on a deep level, because gratitude is really, it opens up the channel so much. So when I then deal with people who are like, not so easy to work with, if I continue to be generous, it's kind of like I'm clearing up my debt with them, and I send them off on a good way, but actually with a gift. It's amazing for business.
Yeah, I got a lot of my compassion-based, so I'm an associate of an organisation called the Compassion in Education Foundation here in the UK, and earlier this couple of months, no, when was it? The founder, the CEO, Maurice, a very dear friend, passed away from COVID, and you know,
Really?
compassion,
Wow.
yeah. Also, along with the person who edited the chapter of the book that's due to go out this year. So we're in a little bit of limbo about whether the book will now be produced. It should be, because it's with the publishers. But I've lost a very dear friend and the editor of the book. And
Wow.
yeah.
So sorry to hear that.
Well, all it's done is reinforce that compassion is the way to be and compassion is the way to go. And sometimes I might come across as an arse and get a bit, you know, keyboard warrior.
But you know, I think compassion is not always sweet.
No.
Great warriors, they fight out of compassion and they kick some people's butt seriously. So, you know, Shaolin monks, they were deeply compassionate, but you know, they could fight really hard.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And these are often the real protectors. They can be fierce, but they're fiercely loving. And this is what when we talked about all heart, all spine, I think this is what I want to say with that message. Like great men that do great things in the world that I really respect, they are powerful, but they're kind, but they can be very fierce and very protective as well.
Yeah, beautiful attributes and characteristics.
So, Cath, where do we take this now?
Well, all of us.
Let's open it up to the people.
Yeah.
Like, I think we wrap up the conversation now. Thank you so much for all your gifts and for your story. And thank you, Cath.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Matt. And it was nice to be on the receiving end of something that anyway.
Yeah, that you initiated.
Role reversal.
Yes, role reversal. Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, let's open up the mics. Guys, jump in. Paola, Trevor, Ula.
Do you have to unmute them? Oh, no.
No, it's all right. Yeah, I've managed to unmute myself. I mean, all I've got to say really is I'm just like so stoked that you're all getting to know Cath. Because, you know, she talks about these fizz buzzers, but this is a common thing that happens around Cath, is that she meets someone and just fireworks start to go off, mental fireworks. It's certainly the case for us. Yeah, I mean, obviously I know Cath really well. So,
how long do you guys know each other?
We met actually we've not actually known each other that long. We've known each other just over maybe about 2.5 years, Cath.
Yeah, when it was at the Gen Smart weekend, wasn't it?
Yeah, so kind of Cath and I were both friends of Pete, and Pete introduced us to Thomas and Shania. So like we got together as a little group and we've been tight ever since. You know, it's like it's crazy. I think Cath and I, within 2 minutes of getting a coffee, were talking about polyvagal theory and our minds were blowing up, and I'm like, you're a total maverick, you know.
So Paula, what type of body work are you doing? And you're yoga instructor?
Right, I am, yeah. So I'm trained in hatha yoga, but I also use a lot of somatic movement. So again, I've got this somatic link with Cath. It's not quite the same as somatic experiencing, it's a different thing, but it is related to trauma. And that trauma can be injury type of trauma, or, you know, like for instance, I had severe birth trauma, or it can be, you know, emotional, mental trauma. But basically, as Cath will tell you, any trauma gets encoded not just in the brain or in the emotions, but in the body, right? And I think both Cath and I, I'm speaking for Cath here, but you know, Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score was a massive jumping off point for both of us. I have trauma history. So, you know, it's like all of us in the biohacking sphere, when we, you know, things start to make sense and we start putting puzzle pieces together for ourselves, and then we meet people who are the same as us or very similar, who are also putting their puzzles together, and we learn from each other.
It's like your vibe attracts your tribe.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't, Cath, I don't know, jump in here, but for me, like client wise, that's what happens as well. You know, like my clients somehow find me, and those, you know, and those people are ready to kind of jump in, and it's not until they start jumping in that they actually start to experience the enormity of what they're experiencing. And you know, like Cath was saying earlier, just the recognition of their history and how their history is tied to today. Even history, like for me, for instance, with birth trauma, history I can't consciously remember.
Yes.
So yeah, it's all that sort of stuff, and we do lots of exercises with the jaw, and you know, for instance, just little things that are ancient wisdom, like bee breath and Brahmi breath in yoga. Now put that together with polyvagal theory, and of course humming is really, really good for people with trauma.
Amazing stuff.
Because it's that sensory, that auditory, that facial thing, you know, it all gets going at once. And so that's part of my journey, is really interesting, putting together the ancient practices of yoga with now modern science, and seeing how it all fits with biohacking too.
Well, I really, we need to have a meeting soon.
Yeah.
And are you coming tomorrow to the speed networking event?
Yes, I am.
Awesome.
I got your emails, but I haven't had a chance to reply yet because I was jumping on here. So
awesome. So this is great.
Yeah.
Ulla, do you want to jump in? I think we're going to go for another 10 minutes or so.
Yes. Okay. Just very quickly, because as I told you at the beginning, I'm quite a baby in all these things, which Cath was saying. But at the same time, it just sounds so natural and so right. And
it's
so,
truth.
yeah, Cath, thank you so much, because it's really...
Oh, I just got goosebumps. Thank you.
Yes, really, really, for me as well. And it's interesting because you know, all the names you were saying and the terminology, it's quite new. So I have written down things which I want to check myself afterwards. But at the same time, recently I took part in a Resilience Summit, which was organized by different people who are mindfulness teachers, coaches, yoga teachers, and it was organized in the US. And it was online, and it was fascinating. And some of the things which you were saying actually were mentioned there as well. So
yes, was it Rick Hansen? Did you have one of my heroes, Rick Hansen, speaking?
I think I did.
Yes.
I think I did.
Oh,
yeah. I think I think
he was on my radar today.
Actually.
Rick Hansen. What does he do?
Rick Hansen is a neuroscientist and Buddhist practitioner. He's written what is it? What's the recent one? Something about finding your Dharma or Neurodharma. That's what he's called it.
Wow.
Neurodharma.
Hot shit. I love it already.
Oh, Matt, he's one of the techniques I use with my clients is his, and it's called Just One Thing. And all you do is you find just one thing per day that you're grateful for. And within a week, I have clients coming back going, oh, there was like 7, and then there was like 11. And I went, yeah, isn't this really good?
Hey, Cath, you have to still show us your tattoos, and I want to see the moon on top of your little creative cave there.
I'll give you some of the tattoos.
Yes.
I've got a whole back piece. I've got them all the way down my legs to my ankle, but you can't see them. But I've got an epigenetic tree of life, and then I've got the brain.
Wow. And
the universe. Well, it's the solar system at the moment. I've got to wait till we're allowed back to tattooists to finish it off.
Yeah, and the moon, please.
And my moon and stars.
Oh, I love it.
This is my little haven.
You're such a character, Cath.
Guys, can I ask you a question? Because, like, what else where else can we look for more information, or how to connect to you more? Just, you know, to...
What will happen, Ulla? I will actually cut this video, and it will go on my website, and I will put all of Cath's information underneath. And I will send it out via email in a couple of days, and you have it all in one place.
Thank you so much.
And if if you need to, I am more than happy to point you in the direction of people such as a colleague called Betsy DeTieri, who's written Teaching on the Trauma Spectrum, another friend who's written about trauma. So there's some very, very, really good, easy entry material.
Okay,
Cath,
great.
Maybe put your email and your Instagram handle into the chat quickly. Then Ulla can already connect with you.
I would love that, especially you mentioned about education as well, and I'm totally passionate about education. So,
Trevor, my man, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. Sorry, go on.
How was it? You had some...
Oh, fantastic.
Happy? Great that you're here. So glad to see that.
My kind of thoughts or questions to Cath is a lot of what was spoken in therapy, in osteopathic functional medicine is very allopathic. So how do you deal with going from more of an allopathic mindset and saying, okay, we put these things into, for example, would be like you mentioned, is it Ruth, the study with the epigenetics?
Rachel Yehuda, yeah.
Yeah, that's it, Rachel, sorry. And it's known in kind of, let's say, shamanic ancestral circles that we, if it's genetics or we have our traits, our ancestors reside within us. And that could be physical, that could be emotional, could be spiritual. But now science is catching up and saying, okay, well, we can study this. So I don't know, kind of my question is, how do you bring in a kind of more holistic?
Generally, talking with the person, and I'll say, what are your thoughts on spirituality or religion? And generally you'll get, well, I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. And I go, okay, so bear with me a minute. Right. What's your thoughts on, and this is something me and Paula talk about, what's your thoughts on, you actually imagined yourself and thought yourself to be here, and perhaps you even created the illness that you're now presenting with. And you get, piss off. And I go, right, okay, so that was maybe a little far-fetched. What about if I talk to you about, because actually it's not far-fetched. That's what science is catching up with. So I bring in levels, and sometimes I'll say, did you know there's pieces of research, and as soon as you bring research to it and kind of just talk about other things, suddenly it's not Cath's opinion, it's fact. So a lot of people within the therapy room like to hear facts. So I'll say, I've got a great book on such and such and such. Would you like to read it? So I've got a very resistant client who does not want to do feelings, but is always complaining about her posture, her stomach ache, So I went and got her the book that's called Your Body Speaks Your Mind. And she went away and she came back and she went, well, it was all right. And I said, okay, so that's where we're at. So it's all right. Let's do a little bit of work around this. Let's do a little bit of work around that. And then we go back to the book. And now she believes what's in the book that little bit more, because we've tied it back into what was happening. So when her father left, she went into a very slumped, shameful posture, which is how she stands. And I'm now saying, okay, so take the shame and look at what's happening now. And I do this backwards and always go backwards and forwards. But I do massively bring in things to see how to talk with somebody. So yeah, it's a case of bring it in. Oh, absolutely, let them shout. You're neat. I'm just thinking it's brilliant when kids start joining in, because I end up talking to them. Not hello. Are you joining in?
Oh, hello.
They can't hear. I've got obviously my headphones in. Okay, let's go and eat dinner. Go on.
Oh, that's so sweet. Trevor. How old is she?
Just turned 2. She's telling me to come and eat dinner.
Yes, good idea. I actually have to run off as well soon.
Well, I need to wait. I've drunk a load of water, so there we are.
Guys,
okay.
What a special evening this was. I'm so pumped it's working, Cath, that more people are joining in.
We will get there. We will get there. Like I said to you at the beginning, this is my world. I do small events, and then suddenly people start going, oh, actually, what you had to say was really important.
Yes. So next week we have Thomas Olivier. So you have to be there, Cath, because you're part of that history too. Paula, would be amazing as well for you to come.
Yeah, I'll be there for sure.
So, and Paula, I will add you to the email list, okay?
Yep.
So that you get all my stuff.
Yeah.
And would you be interested? Do you want to join in on this training that Cath is doing right now on marketing, communication, social media stuff?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I wasn't so sure that there was half this stuff involved. I'm just turning up and
yeah, I'll join in for sure, because I'm at this moment in time a bit like Cath. I'm kind of jumping off in some ways. This whole COVID thing has like pushed me forward, and do you know what, I need to just get out there a bit more. So
yeah, it's really I would say it's COVID was the biggest cold shower of the universe for everyone who has not understood yet that a digital business model is a really good idea.
Yeah.
So
it was kind of one of those things I was wanting to get to, but was so busy teaching and stuff that it's like, yeah, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow.
And this is what I'm really good at now. I'm building up the right systems, the right frameworks, the right networks, the right connections. And it's an acceleration. It's really like Cath. Yes, would you say so? The speed is picking up, right?
Yes, most definitely.
All right,
cool,
guys.
Excellent. Okay,
Love you very much.
I'll email you back, Matt, and I'll join the networking tomorrow.
If you want, let's talk before, maybe between 2 and 4 sometime. I'll send you a time.
Sure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Guys,
nice one.
Lots of love. Ula, all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Ula.
Nice meeting you guys. Hopefully not the last time. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.